Hey everybody, it's Damien from Guitar Journey here, and in this video I'm going to teach you the secret to soloing that greedy guitar teachers don't want you to know. Except that I kind of blew my own cover because in the title to this video I say that there actually is no real secret. Anyways, oh well. The reason I'm making this video today is because I do want to clarify some of the confusion that seems to exist about what should your approach be when you go to take a solo or to improvise, okay? And I'm making this video because there's so much material out there online, not just on YouTube, but other places as well. And very often the message is sort of like there's some secret, some magic formula that if only you knew it and could apply it, that soloing would be easy for you. And so you'll see stuff like somebody will show you this 4-note pattern and they'll say, if you only know this, then you can solo. And people will say that the secret formula is that you should always land your phrases on the root note of whatever chord is being played, or on the third of whatever chord is being played. Or people will say, well, you need to learn triads, the basic chord tones, and work your phrases around these triad notes for each chord that's being played. And none of these ideas is wrong. But honestly, I'm not crazy about these approaches, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. And even though I say that there's no real secret, there is what I like to call sort of a best practices mindset, a best practices approach that I want to suggest that you have when you go to solo. And I'm going to tell that to you in just a couple of minutes. Before I do that, though, let me explain why I'm not crazy about these secret formulas, so to speak, okay? First, even though they're intended to actually simplify things, they can actually be pretty tricky to apply. You know, imagine you're going to jam with your buddy and you're going to play some simple old classic rock songs like House of the Rising Sun or something. So the first 4 chords are A minor, then C major, then D major, then F major, okay? Now, without thinking too much about it, let's see if you're comfortable identifying the third of each of those chords. What's the third of A minor? What's the third of C? What's the third of D major? What's the third of F major? And unless you're just reflexively able to say, well, C, then E, then F sharp, then A, then you're going to have some trouble applying this method. And remember, you don't just need to cognitively know the notes, you need to be able to find them on the fretboard and construct musical phrases around them spontaneously, without any real thought process at all. That's tough to do. So it's kind of ironic because a lot of the people that these formulas are intended for, people who are just getting started soloing or people who are struggling with soloing, advanced beginner, early intermediate type players, they probably don't have that level of music theory knowledge, fretboard knowledge, and so forth that they're going to need to implement that formula. And by contrast, the people who can implement that formula, who do have the necessary knowledge base, honestly, if they've come far enough that they have that degree of knowledge, then they probably don't need that formula. Ironic, as I said. But even more so, even though that information is not necessarily wrong, I want to suggest to you that those approaches are kind of limiting, okay? And if you follow that advice and just do that without more, your soloing is going to get kind of bland, kind of monotonous pretty quickly. And that doesn't have to be the case. I want you to take a little bit of a listening experiment with me, okay? I'm going to play over a jam track now, okay? And I'm going to play a really, really simple solo. And that solo is going to be over the world's most boring chord progression. Like literally, my chord progression, my jam track, my accompaniment track is going to be like 24 measures of an A minor chord. Just nothing but an A minor chord, okay? And I'm not changing chords for a very specific reason. I want you to really listen carefully to the notes that I'm playing over that simple A minor chord. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play in sequence. I'm going to play a series of very short phrases that highlight different notes in succession, one after the other. And the first note that I highlight is indeed going to be the root of the A minor chord, which of course is an A note. And then I'm going to highlight the third of A minor, the minor third, which happens to be a C note. Then I'm going to highlight the perfect fifth of A minor, which happens to be an E note. Then I'm going to highlight the minor seventh of A minor, which happens to be a G note. Then I'm going to highlight the ninth of A minor, which happens to be a B note. And after that, I'm going to highlight the 11th of A minor, which happens to be a D note. And then finally, I'm going to highlight the major 13th, or what we might call this the raised 13th of A minor, which happens to be an F sharp note. Now, just as a very, very quick aside, some of you who know your keys pretty well, you might be saying, wait a minute, there's no F sharp in the key of A minor. That's true, there's no F sharp in the key of A natural minor, A Aeolian. But we actually are allowed to play the raised 13th, the F sharp, okay? That's found in the Dorian mode, A Dorian, okay? And this is a sort of alteration that a lot of players make without, honestly, without even thinking too much about it, okay? It's a permissible note, even though, yes, true, it's not found in A natural minor, A Aeolian, okay? And again, like I always say, if you're not really comfortable with that stream of music theory there, don't worry. It's actually not very important to the message that I want to get across to you today, okay? So if you're not comfortable with that 30 seconds of music theory I just got into, don't worry about it. Not that important, okay? But I'm going to suggest to you that all of these notes, the root, the third, the fifth, the minor seventh, the ninth, the 11th, and the raised 13th, they're all going to work over that simple A minor chord. And in listening, you might say that certain notes, you like certain notes better than other notes. Certain notes sound bluesier than other notes, you know, whatever. But that's kind of a subjective thing. I want to suggest that what you're going to hear is that none of the notes are dissonant. None of them sound like wrong notes, so to speak, okay? And if that's the case, that all the notes more or less work, then we have to accept that some kind of secret formula that says you need to land on the third every time or whatever is very limiting, okay? Now, very quickly, before I play over the jam tracks, I just want you to think about one thing that I just mentioned. I just named the root, the third, the fifth, the minor seventh, the ninth, the 11th, and the 13th. And these notes, as I said earlier, are going to be A, C, E, G, B, D, and F sharp. 7 notes. In other words, there's a complete scale here. Every note from that scale is going to work. Now take a moment and imagine the creative possibilities we have literally at our fingertips. Okay? So here goes. Here's my very simple solo over an A minor chord, highlighting these different notes in succession. So there we are. That's our very simple solo. And yeah, I think we can all agree none of those notes sounded like wrong notes, so to speak. And again, you know, you might say that you like certain notes better, certain notes sound more comfortable, bluesier, whatever, more stable, whatever. And as I got further along with the extensions, like the 11th and the 13th, you might have said, oh, that sounds a little bit more ambient, a little bit more jazzy, whatever. I'm not as much into that. But I think we can say that they all worked. None of them were dissonant. None of them sounded like wrong notes. And so I want to invite you to put aside any suggestion that there's some kind of magic formula to soloing. Because as we just saw and as we just heard, all the notes of a given scale to work as long as that scale is appropriate to the key of the song. So if all of that's true, all the notes work, then what do you do? What is the real secret, if there is one? Earlier on, I told you that there is no secret, but there is a best practices method that I really encourage you to adopt. And it's actually pretty simple, really. All you need to do is become an active listener. And whatever chord sequence is being played, whatever chord sequence you happen to be soloing over, you need to listen very carefully to those chords. And you need to learn to sort of anticipate in your imagination the chords not only that are being played, but the chords that are about to be played. And as you actively listen and anticipate what the next chord is going to be, you need to ask yourself a very important question. You need to ask yourself, where does this note that I'm on now, where does this melody that I'm developing now, where does this want to go in light of the chords that I know are about to be played? Let me say that again because it's really important. Imagine yourself playing over a given chord sequence, and it's a chord sequence that you know pretty well. You need to be actively, not just passively, but actively listening to the chords as they're being played. And at any moment, you need to be asking yourself, where does this note that I'm currently playing, where does this melody that I'm developing want to go in light of the chord or chords that are about to be played? So let me talk you through an example that'll help you get started with this practice. Think of a pretty simple, pretty repetitive chord sequence. Depending on the kind of music you're into, it could be, a 12-bar blues, could be a classic rock song like Hotel California, something like that. You could even be playing like a jazz standard. Something like Autumn Leaves is a great choice. And little parenthetical, if you are going to be playing over the changes of a jazz standard, just choose a really vanilla backing track or a really vanilla version of the jazz standard. Don't find a version with like a bunch of chord substitutions because that might muddy things up a little bit at this stage. The chord sequence should be pretty predictable. And by predictable, I don't mean that in any kind of a disrespectful or judgmental way. I just mean predictable as in repetitive. And it should be a chord sequence, as I said, that you've heard so many times that you kind of know what's coming at any given point. So let's say you're soloing over a really simple backing track of Autumn Leaves. You're playing it in the key of G major, E minor. So you're improvising, and you hear that A minor 7 chord go by. You hear the D7. And you need to be able to hear in your imagination the G major 7 chord that's about to be played. And I want to emphasize, it really doesn't matter if you can actually cognitively, analytically, verbally say, hey, there's a G major 7 chord about to be played. You just have to know the sound that's coming. Hear that sound in your imagination and then say to yourself, where does my melody note want to go in light of the sound that I'm about to hear, which happens to be a G major 7 chord, okay? And honestly, that's the secret. That's the real secret. That's the magic formula right there. Except it's actually very simple and it's not magic at all, okay? Just be an active listener and at every moment pay attention not only to what you're doing on the fretboard, but what is the rhythm section? What is the backing track? Whatever, what your jam buddy, whatever. What are they doing as well? Listen carefully to them and build melodies that work with the underlying melody and rhythm. And of course, that's what music really is. It's the union of melody and harmony and rhythm. And although it's as simple as that, I often tell my private students, simple does not mean easy. Simple is not easy, okay? But today, if you make a commitment to being not just an active listener, but not just a passive listener, pardon me, but a truly active listener, your soloing will move forward as a result. And, in my opinion, if I may say so, that's a much more rewarding way to go rather than just applying patterns or formulas, mathematical formulas or whatever, okay? So that's it, okay? I really hope you've enjoyed today. Thanks for watching, and I hope your soloing moves forward as a result of this approach today, okay? Like I always say, please subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot of great content here. We've got a lot more great content coming, and leave me a comment. Even if you disagree, leave me a comment so we can have a discussion that will enrich all of our respective guitar journeys, okay? Thanks for watching. Have a great day.